Hello pals, and welcome back to another video, and probably my last video of 2022. So today we're gonna go over my top books of 2022. I tried to pick 10 because I feel like that's just, you know, a nice number, and to show you from my least favorite to my favorites of my favorites, but I feel like I couldn't pick 10 that I like fully haven't like not stopped thinking about. So I have 7 for you. And I also couldn't order them because I just, it's hard to order favorite children, you know what I'm saying? So in no particular order, I'm going to be giving you my top 7 books from this year that I read, and I'm excited to share them. So let's start off. What do I want to start off with? Start off with my favorite romance book that I read this year, and that is Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlino. Now, I discovered Renee Carlino this year, and I'm pretty obsessed. I would say all of her books are a hit, so you can't do wrong with her in my opinion, at least of the books I've read so far. But I loved this book. Now, this is an instant love kind of romance, so if instant love isn't your thing, you probably won't love this, but I love instant love. I don't know why. I feel like it's just like, it's like the perfect like cheesy-ish romance that I want, and I just love the idea that people can like instantly connect at a deep level, even though, and like feel like they know someone already when they don't know them at all. I don't know, I just love instant love. So if instant love isn't your thing, maybe this isn't the book for you. But let me give you a backstory on this book. Basically, the two couple found each other during university in New York City. Now, they connected pretty deeply and were really close friends all through university, and everyone thought that, you know, they were dating. Eventually, they kind of connected a little bit deeper, but near the end of kind of their time there. And the main character boy, I forgot his name, I don't know, it's not coming to mind, but he ends up going to Africa to work with National Geographic to be a photographer and like pursue his dream. And so they kind of part ways for about 15 years. And this is kind of their second chance romance of coming back together. And I just loved it because it shows both characters really developing as individuals, but at the same time showing their like instant love romance plus second chance romance, and why they feel like they have always been connected. And I just loved it. There's little ups and downs, and the drama's great, but to me, what really drew me to this book is the fact that both of them as individuals really captured, you know, their dreams while still coming together as one. And you know, the New York City vibe, the Africa vibe, it was so good. Okay, I got one book done, and then my camera decided to die. So now I'm on a different camera, and this is like my big camera. I really hope it works. I hope the audio sounds good. We'll see. Honestly, maybe I'll switch over to this one so in the new year, but anyways, let's continue this, shall we? So the second book I'm gonna go over is My Dark Vanessa. So this book I cannot get out of my head. It has stuck with me so profoundly, and I want to recommend this to everyone I know, but I also understand that this is so dark and so deep, but the author does such a great job at, you know, giving the right empathy and really takes this topic in such a graceful way that I really appreciated it. Essentially, My Dark Vanessa follows this girl who's in school at a private school, and she falls in love with her teacher, and the story follows her essentially being groomed. It gets pretty visual and graphic, so again, like, definitely read the warnings before you get into this. It follows the two of them, and she is deeply in love with him, but also kind of understands that their love dynamic is not typical, but she can't grasp the idea that she is being groomed. So we kind of follow her as a child, but also her as an adult, and what is coming of light as she's an adult. Essentially, other children from the school had also been groomed by the same man, and they are coming forward and they're trying to get her to also come forward about her story, but she can't grasp the fact that she is like a victim. To her eyes, she was never a victim. She still has love for him. So we're kind of seeing these two lights and seeing her like begin to start to realize as she has like intrinsic thoughts about the situation and begin to kind of grapple that like potentially she also is a victim. And it's just really powerful. And again, I think the author did a really good job at making this very empathetic and graceful with this topic. Of course, it is so disturbing. I did not read this and feel at all like at ease. I felt completely disturbed most of the book, but I think that's why it stuck with me so much, is that I went through all the feelings with Vanessa, and so that's why I feel like it was so powerful and I think really important. And it's really nice also to get her POV. I feel like in a lot of like grooming stories you get the teacher's POV, and so having the POV of you know, the victim is something that you don't usually get in writing, and I just really appreciated it. So highly recommend this one, but again, not for everyone. The next book I'm going to talk about, I'm sure everyone really has on their list, is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. Now this is the second book in A Court of Rose and Thorns trilogy series, and I loved this one. I'm putting this on my list because I feel like it really got me back into fantasy. I used to be such a fantasy kind of junkie as a kid. A lot of YA fantasies are just a little bit easier to digest. And I love this series because it's like a mixture of fantasy and romance. So it really keeps you on your toes. It has a bit of, you know, world building for sure, but definitely easier to understand. And then it also has power dynamics, trying to be, you know, the head of the court. And then the romance thrown in. And I particularly like this book in the series because Sarah J. Maas, her ability to make you fall in love with one specific man and twist you in your head to completely hate him by the end is beautiful. I have never experienced something like that reading a book. I've always felt like I've stuck with the same character the entire way through, even if the author is trying to like change your viewpoint. But this book, I 100% swapped over, was like, I no longer like you, sir. And if you know, you know, but if you don't, highly recommend jumping into the series. If you want to get into fantasy, this is so accessible, and if you like romance, then honestly I almost find this series a little bit more romance heavy than fantasy heavy, so you could definitely jump into this as well. I'd be surprised if you haven't read the series yet. It is pretty chunky, so I get it if you're intimidated, but don't be intimidated. I honestly found these books to be so easy to get through, and it did not feel like I was reading forever. Alright, so the next book up I'm going to do is a nonfiction, actually, and that is The Book of Joy. So The Book of Joy follows two really great spiritual masters, and we follow along with their wisdom about living joyfully and how to live happy, and I just found it really inspiring. I also highly suggest jumping into the audiobook version because the way that this author writes, and I have another book by this author as well, is very journalism-esque, and you're actually hearing kind of the voices of the characters in the audiobook, and so it's like you're listening to an interview or like you're listening to a podcast. And it's so great that way because you feel kind of entrapped in the story and also feel like the empathy or the enthusiasm they have for this topic. Essentially, this book made me have a different outlook on life a little bit. That sounds very heavy, but you don't need to take it that heavily. I just found that this gave me a new appreciation for where I am and how to feel a little bit more grateful in what I do have. And it also made me understand, you know, when I give as an individual, when I help others, that's when I feel the most joyful. And I think us as humans are more connected in a way that we don't understand. And so when we can continue to connect, continue to help, and continue to like grow together, that's when we can feel the most joyful. And that's really honestly a very, very summarized version of this book. There's so many deep lessons in here, and each like chapter kind of follows like a different lesson or a different kind of arching view, but I loved it. And when else do you get to hear from like two very, very spiritual beings in one room under one topic? I was super excited and thrilled to listen to this and to grasp so much of the knowledge from them. So highly recommend. Honestly, an amazing nonfiction. Definitely listen to the audiobook. The experience is so much better there. The next book I have is The Last Housewife by Ashley Winston. I feel like I've talked about this a lot, so I'll kind of get to the chase. But this essentially follows this girl who had left university, and during university, one of her friends, her close friends, she basically had two really close friends. One of her close friends committed suicide, and when she left and grew up and kind of developed her life, she was hearing about this podcast, and in the podcast, she discovered that her other friend of these like three groups of girls had also committed suicide, and this man was suggesting that they actually were a part of a murder. And so on his murder podcast, he was suggesting that, you know, maybe they didn't actually commit suicide, but someone murdered them. And so she is now faced with like the idea that something different happened to her two friends. So she goes back to university and tries to discover what had actually happened. And if you love cults, if you love like kind of dark romance, then you'll like this. I thought it was so fascinating. I just find cults really interesting to read about. And so to be actually thrown into one, because the main character goes back and then, you know, pretends to be a part or wanting to be a part of this cult so she can like retrace the steps of her friends essentially, was so interesting and so like page turn. I could not stop turning the page. I was like in such a trance this entire book, and I breezed through it so quickly. Obviously, again, like content warnings here a little bit. It is heavy and dark and definitely not for children. But I loved this book, and I honestly think this would make a killer movie. But that's just me. Okay, the next book I'll talk about is In 5 Years. This is actually the first book I read in January of this year, so it's been a while, so bear with me, but it has stuck with me all the way since then, so you know it's a good one. It is a romance and I love it. Let me kind of read you the description here, just to brief you in. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? When type A Manhattan lawyer Dana is asked the question at the most important interview of her career, she has a meticulous crafted answer at the ready. Later, after nailing her interview and accepting her boyfriend's marriage proposal, Dana goes to sleep knowing she is right on track to achieve her 5-year plan. But when she wakes up, she's suddenly in a different apartment with a different ring on her finger, and besides, a very different man. The television news is on the background, and she can just make out the scrolling date. It's the same night, December 15th, but 2025, 5 years in the future. After a very intense, shocking hour, Dana wakes up again at the brick of night back in 2020. She can't shake what has happened. It currently felt much more than merely a dream, but she isn't the kind of person who believes in visions. The nonsense is only charming coming from free-spirited types like her lifelong best friend Bella. Determined to ignore the odd experience, she files it away in the back of her mind. That is until 4.5 years later, when by chance Dana meets the same very man from her long ago vision. Woo! I love this book. It was so good. It follows, like, again, a type A girl, Dana, who just like feels like she knows her path. She wants a man, she's got a man. She wants a cool job, she's got a cool job as a lawyer. She feels like she's completely on her path. But having a weird dream that she had like woken up with a different man and felt She describes in the book that she like felt this like more content, purposeful feeling when she was with him that she didn't feel in her current life, and that she felt, you know, more secure and just it felt right. So then when she was thrown back into her normal life, she like tried to ignore it, but she could start to see kind of all of the things that didn't feel the same sense as when she was in that dream. And then 4 years later, she sees that guy that was in her dream. Woo! Like, what would you do with that? Am I right? Like, would you be like, this is weird, I shouldn't talk to him, like let's just ignore this? Or would you be so intrigued? And I loved that it follows someone who's very type A and like had a path and thought that their life should be a specific way. And then just to be totally thrown off kilter there. And you know, it does have that instant love feel, as you know that I enjoy, because when she sees this other guy, she feels that like instant love. So yes, highly, highly recommend. I don't know why this book isn't talked about more. It is such a good romance, such a good concept. I loved it. Last but not least is The Book of Hope. Now this is the same author journalist as The Book of Joy. This follows Jane Goodall, and as a child I was obsessed with Jane Goodall. I wanted to understand her, so I just found her story so fascinating, like how she could connect with chimpanzees. It just was like, as a child I was like, okay, I love this and I'm obsessed with animals. Just seeing someone connect with other animals was just super fascinating. And seeing a female be like so heavy into research at a time when I was younger and I didn't see a lot of females in research studies, I just thought she was so fascinating and I looked up to her a lot. So when I saw that she had been part of this book and I could actually listen to her voice on an audiobook, I was like, yes, absolutely, I want to hear her story. And I love the way that she approached the story, in the sense that it was essentially a memoir about her life, but less about her life and more about the lessons and the wisdoms that she learned from her life. And she talks specifically about the idea of hope, and that in a world of global pandemics and a world of where our environment is slowly kind of dying, how it can be really easy to lose hope in the idea that we can turn things around. But hope is the only thing that will tie us all together to make a change. And so she talks a lot about how we should embrace hope, and at times hope can be very challenging and can really, you know, make us come to question. We have so much hope and then something goes wrong and it's easy to kind of bail and feel like the world is out to kind of hate us. But she just keeps circling around and talks about her life experiences where she had a lot of hope and kind of manifested things in her life, and the ups and downs of her life coming to those pieces and working well with her, and she's seeing the hope like kind of transition into like actual things, and then slowly something will like kibosh it and she starts to question. But she says that idea of hope always brought her back to her mission or her goal, and as a community it's kind of something that really draws us together in a lot of situations. And we can kind of look to history, like anytime something has really put us into damage as a community, hope has brought us together to kind of continue to make change and to push through adversity and to push through when we could easily give up. So I found her story completely fascinating, and obviously like it's easy to say that that's like a simple solution, and she understands that it's not a simple solution for everyone, and you can't always just rely on hope to change things around for you, and that life sometimes puts oppression on certain people more than others. So saying that is definitely easier said than done, but I really enjoyed her story, and actually getting to listen to her voice in the audiobook in an interview style that felt like a podcast was such a treat. So if you're at all fascinated by her story, I highly suggest listening to it. Or if you're at all fascinated by the environment and how we can turn things around as a group to make the environment better, then I highly recommend it. But yes, those are all my books for this year that I really, really enjoyed and really, really stuck with me, and I cannot get them out of my head. So if any of those interested you, definitely pick them up. And I will see you guys in 2023. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you guys in my next video.